Back, everybody, to another episode of the Allied Advisors podcast. The podcast specifically designed for mid-market manufacturers looking to scale operations and improve that ever-important bottom line. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Braydon McCormick. Braydon is currently the C-suite operator and serial entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience helping mid-market and PE-backed organizations turn advanced technology into real operating results. Currently a co-founder and managing director at Lightforge Works, Braydon has built and scaled companies from zero to exit ready, owned full P&Ls, and helped leadership teams deploy AI and machine learning to drive margin expansion, new revenue streams, and enterprise value, often in highly regulated, complex environments. His track record includes taking concepts to private equity acquisition discussions, achieving 65% gross margin in services businesses, leading FDA approvals, and creating defensible IP through patented innovation. For manufacturers navigating digital transformation, operational scale, and M&A readiness, Braydon brings a pragmatic, operator-first perspective on how emerging technologies actually show up on the shop floor. And full disclosure, Braydon and I have worked on several projects together, and I can vouch that all that I just said is 100% true. Braydon really does understand how to take concepts from a manufacturing boardroom and make them a reality in the AI space that can be applied today on the shop floor. It's really remarkable, and for somebody like me, it's almost magic. So, Braydon, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today.
Well, first of all, maybe you could write that down for me because that sounds awesome. Like that guy, cool. I want to know him.
I tell you what, I'll give you the transcript and a video of it.
There we go. Perfect. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Justin. I appreciate it. I'm excited to chat about this today.
No, man, like having folks like you on the podcast is it definitely helps me accomplish the goal of helping these mid-market manufacturers scale operations because, man, you bring so many ideas of just how to do that. So jumping right into it, we talk about scaling operations. I think most folks still in the manufacturing space, when they hear AI, they think chatbots or dashboards. But, what I've learned from my short time working with you is this is an extremely limited view, and there's so much more potential out there with artificial intelligence. So maybe walk us through what's your perspective on this and what does that potential maybe look like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we talked to like private equity companies a bunch and lots of companies, and everybody's very high on AI. Like, give me a chatbot. And what's interesting about that is I'll kind of say two things. One is that from an investor landscape, they are not seeing the returns. They're not seeing that kind of increased promise, increased margin promise or increased revenue promise. But when I ask them about what they're doing, I mean, it's going to sound kind of trite, but the ideas of what these companies are putting out there is just kind of dumb. Like you can't just slap a chatbot on your data set and hope for the best, right? People talk a lot about, well, we're going to improve the customer experience by giving them a live AI chatbot that's going to answer all their questions. And, I would actually argue there's two reasons that's dumb. One is that, and forgive me for saying it pejoratively like that, but one is that people actually want to talk to people. Right? If you can shortcut a process in the field, that's different than like, hey, let me give you a customer service chatbot. People don't want that. And I think there's a second reason for that is as we have increased AI slop out in the universe, nobody is going to trust it. They want to actually talk to a person. But the second, I think the much more important reason that that's just a poor way to think about it and lack of vision is that the AI systems that we have today are so much more powerful than just interacting with a chatbot. You can start putting AI in between different systems and have those systems magically connect in ways that you never thought were possible, or would have taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and error after error after error to get that kind of connectivity right. And that's what's really powerful about the kind of the way AI is being implemented. And I'll just give you a brief example of why I think that this is happening. So a friend of mine consults for a major mega automobile manufacturer, and he was just up there talking to their C-suite, and they came to him and said, "Hey, listen, we've crowdsourced AI ideas from our team, and here's a list of 738 AI ideas that we could implement." And he took one look. He's like, "Man, oh man, these guys are just totally blowing it." And he said, And I think this is actually super critical for all of us to be thinking about why AI is. He said they're doing AI for AI's sake because they're afraid of missing out, right? And that's not really what we want to be doing. We want to be looking at what are the business processes that impact revenue, and then how can we fix those processes using AI? And essentially flip that around, like not what can AI do for me, but what am I actually trying to solve? Totally changes the way you think about what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, instead of problem or a solution in search of a problem, you want to flip that and really, what are my problems, and then how can AI be a solution to that, right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
as a software practitioner, right, when I think about building with AI, and that's what we do is we build with AI and we use AI in the tools that we build. So I think about what one problem were we trying to solve here that's going to materially impact your business in a significant way, right? Are we going to see an increase in throughput of your staff? We're going to see a decrease in costs associated with other things. Like, let's really focus in on when there's cost associated with the delivery, what is the expected return, right? We've got to focus on that. Why bother?
Yeah, and I think if people really take a pragmatic approach to their existing processes, I'm in mid-market manufacturers all the time, and the main thing that I see, the big struggle I see, is efficient communication, right? For lack of a better term. They've got some processes that happen. Maybe it happens between the customer and the sales team, and then the sales team has to take that information and communicate it to the order input team, and then the order input team has to communicate that information to vendors to make sure the parts are here, or to the shop floor to make sure that they're doing something special with this particular order for this particular customer. And that communication flow is inherently, or at least it has been in all of my experience, it's always bad. The sales team doesn't give order input everything they need. Order input doesn't tell the vendors everything that's required. So what happens is when everything shows up on the shop floor to actually make the widget, they're missing parts. The parts aren't built to spec, right? It doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and it creates all of this turmoil, especially in mid-market where you don't have, it's not automotive. We're not churning out thousands of these things a day, to the same, to relatively tight tolerances. A lot of these things are very custom, very, very bespoke, and it's really important to get the communication right. And to me, that's where I see all of these opportunities with AI to make sure that you've got, it's almost like a gate, right? The AI kind of sits on top of this communication channel and can say, did you think of this? Have you confirmed this is right? And then kind of helps to augment these people to make sure that they're doing their job better and delivering a higher service or a higher product than what they were doing before. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to process it. Let's deconstruct that a little bit because you put a whole bunch of stuff on the table, right? So when I think about what you've just articulated, we've got maybe two or three separate individual business challenges. One, you said very clearly, which is I've got multiple different communication systems that people are trying to interact with. And just like real specifically, I get an email. I'm in the sales team. I get an email from a customer for an RFP, right? Well, I'm texting it over to the engineer. Hey, I'm gonna shoot you over a PDF via text, who then has to disconnect it and put it onto their desktop to kind of do something, right? Or even worse, hey, I've got the forklift operators on the floor who are supposed to be coordinated, but like I've got a phone call from the floor manager, and forgive me, I don't know all these details, but who has now rerouted me someplace, and that's thrown all the other operations off, and then none of them are connected in any meaningful way. And so we can even take that to, there's a million examples of this. I've got a system that's my old AS400 is sitting on there, and it kind of manages different aspects of my inventory, but that doesn't talk to anything else. And I've got to print it out and scan it and put it into my CRM system that actually, and there's like a million of these, right? So that's the first one is you've got these, any number, email, text, phone, old systems, or, order management systems, SAP, that just don't talk, and they don't talk well. And if you want to get them to talk well, it takes traditionally, it takes a huge amount of software engineering to get those things to connect well. And then you're still getting errors all the time. So that's one problem. The other problem you just kind of, I think, articulated is I've got all these different teams doing different things in different ways with different cultures of each team. And none of them really communicate that well effectively as an organization. And they have kind of non-standard ways of thinking about it across the way they do it. Now, and we're not talking about 3M of the world where everything's like wildly buttoned down. Right? We're
Hmm.
talking about folks who are still scaling, still learning what that change looks like, and different teams are at different rates of speed of that change. And that creates all kinds of mayhem. So when I think about the situation you just articulated, in between each of one of those disparate spaces, whether that's a piece of technology or a workflow associated with it, there's an opportunity to insert a version of AI that can facilitate those transfers in a way that you can't do today. Right.
Hmm.
So imagine the following scenario. In fact, this is an example that you and I have talked about. We have a customer who has an RFP process, and this is not shop floor type of problem, but it is an engineering firm,
Hmm.
and they get a ton of RFPs a year, which I wish we all wish we had that problem. But the problem they have is they can't service them all, and the reason for that is that everybody will be familiar with this type of problem. You get the RFP and it's an email, it's got a drawing associated with it. The sales team says, okay, we need to figure out if our engineering team can support this. Sends it over to engineering. They got, somewhere between 3 and 20 engineers who are all going to take a look at it. And somebody says, I think we built that back in 2002. Let me go see if I've got that drawing somewhere in SharePoint. They go and they look at it. They say, yeah, that looks about right. I think we can do it. This is a week later, by the way. And then next thing that happens is they say, well, we need to spec this and scope this and see if our vendor in China can do it. All right. So they're gonna redact that document. They're gonna set up a spreadsheet that maybe they've used before, maybe they're doing it net new. They email it off to China. Another week goes by, China gets back with their new spreadsheet in Chinese that's totally different, and they have to now figure out what that means, and they've got to then decide. And this is before they've even decided if they're going to respond to the RFP. Yeah, I think we can build this. Yeah, I think we can do it cost effectively. Hey, sales team, let's take it. Sales team now has to convert that back and respond. 3-4 weeks go by and they lose RFPs because other people have gotten to it. All of that just is articulated in the way you did. They've got a process problem, they've got a communication problem, and they've got a technology integration problem, all of which we can solve using AI connectors between those using standardized processes, right? As engineers, as manufacturing folks, we know what standardized processes mean in terms of being able to get things done and get them done to quality spec. And this is no different. We're just inserting agents in between these processes to facilitate the transfer of information.
Yeah, I mean, what I see as I dig deeper into this AI rabbit hole with you guys is really what my good friend Larry Collette, who's another AI genius, brought up in one of our conversations is AI really isn't here to replace anybody, but it's going to augment them so that they work more effectively and more efficiently, right? Because having AI be able to parse that data and then make recommendations that shorten that window, right? So that instead of having to do all that work, like you mentioned about going back to SharePoint, pulling up the drawings, reviewing the drawings, seeing if they work, sending them to the vendors, AI can sit there, AI can go to SharePoint, AI can review the drawings, AI can make a recommendation that then the engineer only has to look at it and go, yeah, I agree with this recommendation. Let's proceed. Or, hey, I have additional questions. AI is able to answer those questions, right? It takes what the human can do and puts it on a whole nother level. I mean, I see it even in my own work, right? I'm generating sales presentations, I'm generating responses back to clients. AI is able to help me do that way more rapidly and at a higher level than what I could do of my own free will and volition. So, I think that is when manufacturers think about AI, they need to think about where are we, in my opinion, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong, where are we missing the mark? Where are we not achieving at a high level? And then how can we use software to raise our performance so that we can be, a higher performer so that we can delight our customers in a more rich, robust, thorough way. I mean, is that
So yeah, it makes total sense. I guess I want to say one big comment, and then I want to get into some of those details you said, because I think there's an interesting structured way to think about what you just put together. But I think one thing that's going on is there's a lot of fear around AI. Is it going to replace my job?
yeah.
Is it going to take over my company? Is it going to turn me into there's a long running kind of scenario joke about paperclip manufacturing. If you turn AI into an automated paperclip manufacturer and tell it just to make paperclips, it'll steal all the metal in the world and and eventually wipe out humanity just to make, paper clips, right?
Right.
That's a misrepresentation of the original paper. But more importantly is that there's a lot of fear around this. And we're finding, at least for the foreseeable future, and I do think that there's some time docs here that we need to be cognizant of, that within some period of time, a year, two, five, there will be still significant structural changes that AI is having on us as a society. For the next 18 to 24 to 36 months, this is a massive accelerant for businesses,
Hmm.
massive accelerant for like human productivity, particularly those who are information centric, right? But if we start doing what I'm saying in just a second, implementing them into our systems, it's going to be an accelerant across your business, right? I
Yeah.
think the wrong way to think about it is there's a security flaw here. These AI systems learn my processes and they're going to take, it doesn't work like that. AI doesn't work that way, right? So there's a lot of fear about, does it take my job? There's a lot of fear about it's going to learn my private information and then it's going to disseminate that, right? That's actually not the way AI works. Sure, certainly you have to be careful about exfiltration, which is the extraction of your private data. But if you put guardrails in around that place, around that, this is a non-concern. So let's table that one. I think more importantly, you just highlighted something really interesting, which is you at a personal level. And I think millions and millions of people, who are using ChatGPT, see this every day. AI is giving you kind of a new way of operating your daily life, right? And like I stick it in there and gets me something of value that would have taken me hours, and I wouldn't even have bothered doing it before because
Hmm.
it would have taken so long and been so tedious. And now I've got something of value that I just did, and it has meaning to me, right? And I can use it in my business, I can use it in my home life, whatever it happens to be. So that's at the individual level. I don't think we've seen successful implementations at the enterprise level yet. Companies like Oracle are attempting to put this into their large products. Microsoft's obviously trying to do that. I've yet to see really a successful kind of enterprise level implementation, which brings me to kind of, I think, for what I see and what we do at Lightforge Works is we think about problems in really small chunks, right?
Hmm.
So these are not individual human problems. Like Justin's got a problem about creating sales decks, right? That's not that you do, but just hypothetically, right? But like I, as an organization, have this interpersonal communication problem between my email and my chat, and like we have a client that is like a commercial lawn care business, and they're texting their field teams when a quote request comes in, and that is okay, but it gets lost because they're texting between the office admin and the field rep, and who's mowing grass. And that is something that is easily managed by AI to capture all that, right? So that becomes an accelerant where the ball never gets dropped, and they see an uplift on new clients because nothing gets dropped, right? So
Hmm.
there's ways we can connect these things, and what we refer to as a single purpose application, right? It has one little problem that has a massive uplift for your business, and we solve it using AI. So that example I just gave with a commercial landscaper is a good one because we're not trying to rebuild their entire operations. We're not building them a whole new inventory management system. We're just trying to solve the fact that when their agents are out in the field, they're not able to effectively go and retrieve information about a prospect and return it to the office and still get their work done, right? That's a simple, small problem that AI can help dramatically. And there's millions of these in every business. And I think that's like just to kind of put it in clear terms, there's like, in my view, there's like three broad categories here: individual use of AI, organizational, interdepartmental, technology use of AI, where we bolt it inside of these things that facilitate communication, and then broad based, something that is yet to be really, really well defined at the enterprise level.
So there's a couple things I want to go. I want to go back to the security thing because I do think that's a huge topic, especially in the mid market space, because they see AI and a lot of folks are very hesitant about hooking up their systems to these large language models for fear of IP piracy and all this good stuff. So I do want to go back to that. But before we get into that, the single purpose applications that you were mentioning, you guys have really kind of taken traditional software development and stood it on its head, right? I mean, in the past, before AI, just to talk about software development was 25, 50, 75, $100,000 before I ever got anything to look at. But you guys are approaching that totally differently.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this, right? Because what we're attempting to do is recognizing that the power of AI in software development has fundamentally shifted the way software development is being done or should be done. Now, most software development companies are still kind of really far behind in how they do their software development considering AI, and they have lots of what I would think of as tech debt, but also organizational debt. You've got 300 staff, right? You don't want to just start letting them go. So how do you deal with that in the software space? In our view
Mhm.
of the world, we built our company AI first. So what that means here is that we've restructured the way we think about software development completely. So if you've ever developed software in or had software developed for you as an organization, you'll probably recognize this pattern, which is, hey, I've got a problem I want to have solved. I'm going to go find a vendor that can build it, or maybe I've got an IT department that says that they can build it, but they actually wind up outsourcing it to a vendor. And what happens is that vendor comes in, interviews you, you have lots of conversations about all the things that you need. The stakeholders get involved. You start talking workflows, here's what we're going to build. It's going to be the most amazing and magical thing. And then you got your scope and they say, yeah, that's going to be, 75,000, 100, 200, a million, whatever the number is, right? It's a lot of money typically. And then this is what invariably happens, which is the project starts and things change. Stakeholder says, actually, we also need this. Other stakeholder says, no, we don't need that, but we need it this way. So can you change that? And then they get the first draft of this thing out the door, and people are like, I'm not using that. This is the worst looking thing I've ever seen. And they go back to the drawing board. It goes from a 12-month implementation to 18 to 24 to 36. And we didn't go from $75,000. We're now at $350,000. This happens all the time. It's called scope creep, and
Mhm.
it's endemic to the software industry. And so what we did instead is we said, you get a totally different model, which is we look at the world and we say, we're going to solve that one single problem. We call the single purpose application. And what we do is we say, we will have a scope to you in 30 days. And in day 60 from the time we engage, you will have working software, period. And it will be a fixed price. You don't pay an upfront. You just start paying a hosting fee, and we put all the costs inside of that. And so there's no surprises. There's no changes in cost. There's no scope creep, because what we do instead is say, for that fixed fee and that 60-day run time to delivery, what can we fit in there that solves that one problem? If anything else is too big for that, sorry, that's not going in that. We can do that again later. We can do another one some other time, but you get that fits into that 30 to 60-day time frame for delivery at that fixed rate. And that's all we're doing. And what it does is it fundamentally changes the way you can think about the impact on your business. No longer putting it at your CapEx dollar amount that you're like, yeah, it's a one-time fee, but oh my God, we're taking a hit this year on this thing. No, it's just a low cost OpEx that you can get immediate return on and on your expense on. And so that's a really big shift that I think most software organizations just don't know how to contemplate.
Well, and I think too, I mean, most custom software applications, there's the CapEx, which is the development piece, but then there's the OpEx, which is the running the
Yeah.
software, right? I mean, somebody has to support that software. So you still are paying that monthly service fee, or maybe they bill it annually, but you're still paying for it in addition to the development cost. I mean, you guys have essentially wiped out, you cut the expenses, you wiped out the development cost there. So I mean,
Yeah, totally. You're 100% right. And and it's a good call out, right? Which is that just because you paid for the software doesn't
doesn't
mean it doesn't have costs associated with it over
correct.
time. You got
Right.
support costs, you got hosting costs, you got maintenance costs, you got feature change costs, there's all kind of stuff. So we've really looked at this very closely. I mean, we've been developing software in different organizations for many, many years and have seen every version of this type of problem. And so we said it's time to really shift the way we think about software development. And
Mhm.
not because, I mean, it makes it easier for us, but more importantly is that our customers say, I want no surprises. I need this working. It supports my business, and I don't want to see any bumps in it. And that
Right.
goes for cost and management and support. Like, it just needs to work. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of our reference, our North Star is that. And we just kind of keep our eyes focused on how we deliver that way. But I do want to answer the security question if that's okay.
Yeah, that's where I was getting ready to go back to is, can we go back to the security? Because there's so many
Yeah.
people that are so nervous about that.
Yeah. So I do want to be super clear. Like, for everybody who's listening, if you open up ChatGPT or Claude or Grok, right, and you're in your web browser, do not put your private information in there, period, full stop. Like, just don't do it. The reason for that is that unless you're using what's known as an API or a professional account, and you've turned off the flag that says you're allowed to use my information. They are using your information. So if you just open up ChatGPT and you paste your company, your P&L statement into it because you want to get some analysis on it, they are taking that and you're going to use that for training data. So don't do that. That's a bad idea. Now, if you have a private instance that's connected to what's known as an API, which is known as an application programming interface, right? So that allows you to get access to the private versions of the models where they do not take your data and use it for follow-on training data, or at least they promise not to, right? So you can even further, if you have very sensitive data, you can host AI in your own private cloud, which absolutely guarantees that they are not using your training data. But I just need to pause for a second because I think there's also a misconception about how AI works. So AI systems that we have today do not learn from the information you put in them automatically. So let's imagine for a minute that you put your information in there and you're chatting away with it. It doesn't actually learn anything about you. It holds that in a repository known as a context window, or they even have a document repository that allows that context window to use it. But it's not going off and learning that and able to share that with anybody else. Because what happens is every period of time, month, 6 months, a year, each one of these large language model labs has to take their new set of data and they retrain their models so that they function differently. It's a little hard for me to explain and know how to exactly articulate that. But basically, these things are a fixed entity and they have a cutoff date of knowledge, and anything you add into it doesn't actually add into it. They have to retrain it later to get it to work. So what that means in practice is nothing that you put in there is going to be used right away, if it's used at all, and it doesn't actually learn on the fly. But just to kind of reiterate, don't stick your stuff in the ChatGPT. Go get a pro account, go get a pro Gemini account, go get a pro Grok account, go get a pro, and make sure all the flags are turned off that says you can use my data. And then you're starting to get safer, but you still have a lot of things to think about. Does that kind of start to get at it, Justin?
It does, but I think from an enterprise standpoint, right? So if you're a mid-market manufacturer and you're, at 150 million a year in revenue, and you're looking to how do I plug AI into my existing systems, into my email, into my my ERP, my WMS. How do I do that without exposing all of my my employee pay, my employee's address, social security numbers, my P&L, all of the sensitive data that you don't want the world to see? How do I plug AI into this to get the benefits of AI without exposing my organization to cyber attacks, to all of these other negative things that we hear so much about in the news?
Yeah, sure. So let me figure out how to articulate this effectively. So we've got kind of two different things to think about here. One is the data that you have and where it sits in your organization. Maybe three, how you get at that data, or how another system, regardless of whether it's an AI system or it's anything else, how does it get at that data? And then the third piece is, what do you do with that data once you have access to it, right? So if your system is totally closed off, which many are, other than being able to email, which, just as an aside, email is one of the least secure forms of communication you can have. But be that as it may, you can share a doc privately. Maybe it's Office 365 or it's Google Docs. You can share privately. And that's reasonably secure, not totally, but reasonably. But we need to get a different kind of access through kind of backdoors, right? And they're not backdoors like in the sense of Matthew Broderick and War Games. It's like a backdoor that is what's known as the application programming interface, the API, where we have authentication and authorization. So authentication is you are who you say you are. Authorization says, and you are allowed to connect to this, right? And so we can authorize at different levels inside of a system that says you can connect to this, the P&L statement, but you cannot connect to the social security numbers. And this has nothing to do with AI. This is purely kind of an access level control model where whatever the AI gets, it can't be like, oh, actually, I want the social security numbers. Can I go find it? Right? It doesn't work that way, right? Now, if you give it access to everything, it could work that way, but we don't do that. I just need connectivity to Justin's email account, right? To pull down information. And we actually want to put some firewalls between how that works too. We want to be super careful about those things. So now let's imagine we've opened up this certain aspects of the system. We know that Justin's connecting to them, or Justin's, AI agent is connecting to them, and he's only got access to certain aspects of it, which is fine. Okay, so that we're comfortable with that. Now we transfer it over a secure line, some sort of encryption level, kind of a secure way of doing it. And now what happens at the AI level, right? So what we would do, and my recommendation for, a company with $150 million in revenue manufacturing, probably with a global supply chain of some kind, is that you want to have a private US-based hosted AI provider. This could be at Amazon. They have a lot of those. We host a lot of our stuff at Amazon. Could be directly with OpenAI or Anthropic. Could be directly with Google. They have a wide variety of suites. Could be with IBM. But US-based hosted, we stand up our own instance of it. This is not super expensive. It sounds really complicated. It's actually quite easy. And now we're connecting that private instance that nobody else in the world gets to use, just you. And it is processing your data in the way we specify it to do so. So now you don't have to worry about, is it going to process the data in some other way? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I just want to make sure I'm tracking. So you're saying you would set up a private instance of Pickett, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, Claude, of some large language model, right, on a private server, and then you would feed your data into that model on that private server and utilize AI that way. Did I understand that?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to think through this too. When we talk about giving access or an authorization, that works because let's take an ERP system, for example. An ERP system is nothing more than a series of tables that you could call out data and merge that data and view that data different ways. But that's really all an ERP system does, is take data stored in tables and put it in a readable format for the
generally speaking. I mean, it's got some workflow associated with it too, but yeah.
So when we talk about authorization, basically what you would say is, okay, Mr. Large Language Model that I have sitting on my private instance, you have authorization to these tables, but not these tables, right? And you draw fences around it that way. Okay, I understand that. I can understand that working that way for your ERP system, your WMS, but how does it work for email? How does that seems like a bit more of the wild, wild west? That's not a table. That's a cache of documents, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's a good question. So email, I think, does require some additional controls. And let's just talk about what email does and doesn't do. So email, I think, is right. You said it's a cache of documents, essentially, right? So it's just this electronic transfer protocol that allows for semi-rich formatted documents to be transferred back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what that necessarily means is you can click send. You can draft an email and you can click send. You can have an AI agent do that for you. You can have AI agents write emails and send them all day long.
Yeah.
In fact, you're probably getting vast quantities of spam from this very process. And you can also have AI read all your email and process that and make sense of it and actually take action on it. We have a client that is a logistics client that we email in, the logistics requests come in, it gets processed and triaged by an AI agent directly in the inbox. And then the AI agent then takes that information and puts it into a tracking environment where they can kind of manage their logistics. So it took out the vast quantities of having to copy and paste. What we did not enable in that situation is that AI agent could then respond to those emails. This was exclusively triaging. So this is where we start making policy decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're big believers that AI is awesome. And I mean, it is truly awesome, but you still need to have a human do review, right?
Mm-hmm.
Humans are the final arbiter of judgment and quality. And that is just the way it's got to be, at least for the foreseeable future. So let's imagine for a moment that you've hooked it into your email system and it's reading Justin's email and it's doing things like processing, et cetera. And it's saying, hey, Justin, you've got this super important email that you've been ignoring for a week, dude, like do something about this. Should I draft an email for you? And let's say you've imagined that you could allow it. And hey, I've drafted this email for you. We don't allow the AI to send that particular one. Now, we might learn enough over time that it could do that, but out of the gate, no, you need to be kind of monitoring those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, is that something that you guys do for clients is to help them set up that private instance of a large language model. You guys do that as well. Okay.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. So
okay.
it's a soup to nuts kind of thing that we always start with what's the business problem we're trying to solve? And
Right.
what are the pieces of the technology stack that we'll implement that will actually get us there? And then what is the way that experience is going to look like? Like
Right.
as a user, I need it to work for me. Right.
Yeah.
This is why we do it custom, because if it's not custom, it's not going to get used.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, where have you seen this implemented, or maybe you've tried to implement it and just watched it fail magnificently? What are the pitfalls that folks need to be aware of so that they don't go down that path?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. So I think something super cognizant to be aware of is that it's really easy to fall into the trap of AI can do everything. And so we're going to have it do everything.
Right.
And it may be true that AI could do all these things. But if you start doing that, it becomes just like a disaster. There's this funny meme of like for vibe coding where it's got like the first layer of bricks, the second layer of bricks. They're building a brick wall. And by the time it's just like a top, it's just like a jumble of bricks with like mortar in between them, and you're like, what happened? And that's kind of the experience that if you grow too big in your vision for what you're going to do, unless you're super structured and careful about it, it just turns into a disaster. Right. So don't do that. Right. This is what been part of the reason why we focus on the single purpose applications, is by keeping it focused and narrow, you can build really tight code. Otherwise, it just winds up being a mess. I think the other more important, that's super important what I just said. But the other thing is that like you've got to start with a really focused business problem, or else it's like. So you and I actually had a conversation with a firm where they were like, we just haven't seen the value. We've implemented a bunch of chatbots for customer service, and people they just didn't do that much. And we're like, that's because that's not a good use of AI and doesn't get you any ROI. Like, well, what are you doing? Like, and so I think those are the two kind of magical keys. Don't build too big too fast, and don't build something that doesn't have real value.
Yeah, you talk about the chatbots. Side note, my mother's sewer got clogged the other day, and we were calling this very popular, company that specializes in unclogging sewer lines. And she calls them, and this chatbot answers, right? And she's having this conversation with this chatbot, and she has no idea. Like, she thinks she's talking to Joe in Wisconsin. And but you could tell, like, this is obviously AI, and it was a very unpleasant experience. Like, she's looking at me the whole time, like, what's this guy's deal? And I'm telling her, I'm like, you're on the phone with a computer. You're not on the phone with a person. That's AI. And so she hangs up, and we laugh about it. She's like, I didn't like that. That was really creepy. She was very put off by it. And then the appointment that she supposedly set up with this AI chatbot was totally, they didn't honor it the next day. They're like, oh, yes, ma'am, that's not working. Sorry for that. But yeah, we won't be able to get out there till, whatever. So it was a complete disaster for her. And I was thinking, I was like, that is what you shouldn't do with AI, right? You shouldn't roll out tools that are clunky, that don't work. And you shouldn't just roll out AI for AI's sake. It needs to solve a problem. And you need to validate that it actually solves the daggum problem before you walk away from it and give it to your customer.
Well, so that's a really good point, right? So that experience, like your poor mom, oh my God.
It was pretty funny. I laughed, she laughed, but
I think what you just articulated is something. I think there's kind of two really interesting pieces of that. One is the notion of validation, right? Did it actually do what it's supposed to do? And second, I mean, we've all heard about hallucinations. It happens all the time. So I'm fond of saying that hallucination is actually not a bug; it's a feature. Essentially, AI, large language models, that's all they do. They just make stuff up. That's what they do. It just happens to be that most of what they make up is valuable to us. But there's a percentage of that that's not valuable to us. And we're like, I expected you to do it this way. Right. And so we have to put some controls in place to manage for that kind of thing. Right. So in the case of your mom's example, when she's talking to the AI agent, the controls, and I'm not an AI voice agent expert by any stretch of imagination. I have no desire to be, but what I would imagine in that situation is that they've gone through a reasonably rigorous exercise of like putting some controls in place. But one of the things that they missed was the AI agent says, I've taken care of that. Now, what happens when it
Mhm.
doesn't? The AI agent needs to know that it didn't and report back, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to access that system right now. Please call 1-800 fix my
Yeah.
pipes,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
and get a real human being, we're working on our system. So they
Yep.
need to have mechanisms by which they can do that validation in real time so that we don't have those types of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, for her, it was actually pretty good. I mean, she thought she was on the phone with Joe from Wisconsin, who just happened to be kind of weird. So I mean, it was pretty good, but it just didn't deliver like it was supposed to deliver, right? I guess they got the perk of avoiding paying Joe from Wisconsin, but they missed where Joe from Wisconsin would have actually booked the appointment and had somebody at my mother's house to unclog that sewer pipe. So
Yeah,
anyway,
and I
it
guess
was
that's what I know I keep harping on, like, get your return on investment here. So, but that was, I think, a misguided return on investment. We're going to cut out X number of onshore, offshore phone representatives, and that's going to be awesome, right? Don't do that. Accelerate your business
right.
with better operational support on the back end to get those reps out to fix those field agents out to fix those pipes in minutes, not hours,
It
right?
goes
Use
back
it that way.
Yeah. It goes back to augmenting the people you have, not looking to replace them. Like make them more efficient, make them more effective, make them better at their jobs, but don't think of this as I'm going to replace Bill because it's probably not that cut and dry.
Yeah, you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Well,
Yeah.
Braydon, again, man, thank you so much for carving out the time to come and speak with us today. I hope everybody at home gets as much out of the conversation as I've gotten. I've learned a ton in the 45 minutes, whatever it's been since we've been on this show. So again, thanks so much for the time. Maybe we'll have you on again down the road. AI is continually progressing, so maybe 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, we'll come
Yeah.
back and see
It was
where we're at.
awesome. I always love to talk about this stuff. It's so fun. And when the singularity hits and we're all just making paper clips, so you can tell them.
That's it, man.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right.
Justin. Really appreciate it. It was a good time.
Absolutely. See you, bud.
All righty.